right, welcome back to another episode of the Enablement Brew. And on today's episode, unfortunately, Carly can't be with us, but I am drinking a tea on her behalf, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I am joined today by Meyah and Jonathan from the Practice Lab. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yes. So I'm Meyah,
And I'm Jonathan.
and we run a training company called the Practice Lab, which is really designed to make it easier for salespeople to turn all of that great information that exists out there on how to sell and what to say and what approaches to take into actual skill and behavior change that they can point to and make good use of on their sales calls with prospects. Really taking almost like an athlete style approach to training sellers and creating behavior change.
Love it. So I've actually had the pleasure of working both with Meyah and with Jonathan, running a few different training sessions for the sales team. And I can say that even from an enablement perspective, it has been extremely eye-opening. The approach, the thought process behind putting together a training, and then a little bit of self-reflection as to why did maybe certain trainings that I've ran in the past didn't necessarily go down as well, or potentially the information wasn't necessarily retained. And this got me thinking that actually a lot of enablement leaders out there could probably benefit from hearing from you guys what works really well, what works well with sellers that you work with, and why maybe this tendency for us to overload is an absolute overkill. So let's start a little bit with your approach to training, because it is different to what others do out there.
Yeah, so I guess at a high level, what both May and I experienced, myself experiencing it from the rep side of it, her experiencing it from the trainer side of it, is this phenomenon which we all know, which is that you can put on a training. Reps genuinely love the training, rate it highly, love the ideas shared, and want to implement them. And yet, when you watch people's sales calls 2 or 4 weeks later, you realize people are just continuing to sell the way they've always sold, regardless of the fact that they were trained on a different way of doing it. So we both experienced that phenomenon, right? Her mostly more on the trainer side of things, me on the rep side of things. And we both started wondering, how do we solve this? And we actually looked outside the world of sales for answers. We started reading books written by researchers who had spent decades studying top performers in different industries, right? From the military to sports teams to actors to musicians and beyond, trying to figure out, how do these groups change behavior? How do these groups take new information in theory and turn it to something they can regularly, reliably do come performance time? And for like every single discipline that was studied, the same answers popped up. It was practice, and a particular style of practice they use called deliberate practice, which tends to really cut out all the fluff, right, that happens during normal performance time or normal practice, and really just zero in on those learning moments, those aha moments where new ground is broken, where skill is grown. And deliberate practice really just is a style of practice that condenses those moments. So you can spend the entire 60-minute session, beginning to end, having these learning moments, these moving forward, improving moments, right, with all the fluff in between kind of cut out. So it helps them to grow tremendous amounts of skill in a really short amount of time, and ultimately, change their behavior so that even under pressure, they can access these new ways of doing things that they were taught previously. So we basically spent the last couple of years kind of in a lab here experimenting to try to figure out, can you take this deliberate practice idea that musicians in the military use, and can you apply it to sales? And if you do, does it actually work? Does it create behavior change, right? Do the skills stick? And, to summarize the 2 years of experiences, yes, it does work. It works just as well in sales as it works in every other discipline.
It must be an incredible feeling when you see behavior change and when you hear the feedback that sellers are potentially doing things in the way that you've taught them, that they're implementing what they have learned. What do you think is that magic formula for success? Because a lot of enablement leaders, we're working in a time that is quite challenging. The market is quite tough. Our sellers are struggling. We're all trying to find ways in which we can be better, more effective, more efficient. And it's almost like we're looking for that magic pill. We're trying out different things each time, and then we're still unsure whether that's the right approach, whether it really made a difference. How do you measure that? How do you look for that behavior change?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's funny, like we talk about deliberate practice as though it is this specialized approach to practice, which it is, but there's also something really intuitive just about the idea when anybody thinks about any time they've tried to do anything well, sitting in a lecture with slides for an hour or scrolling LinkedIn or even listening to a podcast, while it's great for gathering information and filling your brain with knowledge, like, was that enough to allow you to play the piano or to cook that recipe in a way that felt really good or to, swing that tennis racket? It's like the secret to skill development for human beings is kind of zeroing in on a specific behavior and then getting in your repetitions, right? So building awareness of what the thing you should be doing is. What does great look like? And then actually having a chance to try it on for size, right? So in the case of sales, it's like you pick a moment, like in our work with you. Part of what we were trying to do was figure out, how do we engage prospects during our demos, right? Get them talking, but also get them proactively thinking about how what we've just shown them in our demos is going to live and breathe and impact their world, right? Because if they leave a demo not having a sense and not having been able to connect those dots, it's pretty hard for them to make the case, let's say, to the powers that be, right? Their decision-making team. So that was the skill we were working on. How do we engage prospects and really get them connecting those dots in the moment in the demo? So what did we do? We picked a moment, a specific moment, a moment right after you share a feature where you do something. What do? You ask a specific kind of question, right? And we spent the entire session really working on this one moment, teasing out the different types of questions that reps could ask, giving them an opportunity to create those questions and then practice those questions so that they leave the session having learned, having created, having practiced. So they're that much closer to feeling more confident and smooth, like they've made it their own, so that it feels less scary when it comes time for their next demo, when they're like, oh crap, I just learned this new thing. Now I have to do it. Well, they've already gotten their repetitions and their at-bats to make that possible. So that's kind of the zeroing in on the moment and then the specific behavior, giving a rep or an understanding and a picture of exactly what great looks like, what they should be aiming for, is a really, really vital part of starting to inch our way towards behavior change.
And we're talking about small chunks of information.
Yeah.
And in the world of enablement, and a lot of enablement folks out there have different opinions on this, but you might get a VP of sales or a CRO coming to enablement saying, we have to run a boot camp. It has to be 6 hours long, or it has to, go through 2 whole days. And we just need to go through all of this information. Thoughts? Is that an effective use of time? Let's be honest.
It depends. I think it depends on what you're aiming for, right? There is certainly value to filling people's heads with new information they didn't have before and equipping people with new concepts and frameworks and ideas they didn't have before. And if you're looking at your team and you realize the thing that's holding them back is they just don't have the information they need to have, and they just don't even understand the concept of like what their job is and what's going on in the sales process. If that's the biggest gap for you, then maybe, yeah, right? Maybe you just hired on a fresh sales team of 20 college graduates who've never sold before, and they literally just don't know what their job involves, right? Or they literally just don't know what good and bad looks like. That might be the time to sit them down for 6 hours a day and just fill their head, because there's some value to that. What we've seen, though, industry-wide is that most salespeople have had their heads pretty well filled, right? Most salespeople understand the core concepts they understand. Most salespeople know the basics of how they should be doing their job. Typically, their knowledge is, 70% of where it needs to be. The problem is their implementation, their execution lags far, far behind their knowledge. So for most teams, that's not a really good strategy, right? For most teams, it's more a matter of looking at, all right, what are the things that they may already know, but that they aren't doing, right? What are things we really need to change about their behaviors? And you generally get much better results by focusing there. But not to say there is no time and place for, lots of knowledge sharing. But for the average sales team, and B2B tech, they usually know enough to get by, right? More than enough to get by. The trouble is the execution piece is lagging very far behind their knowledge. So that's where you get the most results by focusing there.
And, on the boot camp front, it's like we all know, right, that like the great tradition of the enablement boot camp, right? And it's not that there's no value there, but some small things that one can do to make a boot camp more effective is to make sure that they're inserting an opportunity for reps to take what they've just learned in the moment and get in some at bats and get in some practice, right? Because it can be pretty overwhelming to take in a full day of information. If we're not going to scrap the boot camp altogether, let's make it easier for reps to turn information into behavior by giving them a chance to try it on. Because one of the big barriers that we've found for reps trying on for size things they've just learned is that the stakes on a call with a prospect or a customer, if you're like a CSM, the stakes are kind of high, right? You've got the relationship on the line. Sometimes you've got big revenue on the line. So the time to try out a brand new thing that you've never had a chance to do before is not that high pressure moment, right? It's too scary and it's too risky. So another benefit of giving reps an opportunity to at least get in some at bats and get a feel for it and make that script that they heard that they should be saying their own is so that it feels less scary and they're able to pull it off so much more smoothly when the stakes are high because they've had that safe space to mess up and practice and stretch and figure it out.
Yeah. Do you think the real practice comes in the role plays that we do potentially with our peers, or the real practice comes when you're facing that customer, speaking to that prospect? That's where the real learning happens. Or do you think it's a combination of both?
I actually don't think a ton of learning happens when you're in front of a real prospect and doing it. Because our brain really has two different modes it can operate in, right? And we call this the performance zone and the improvement zone, terms we borrowed from Rob Jepson when we were on his show. He kind of taught us those terms he uses. And basically, when your brain is in the performance zone, its focus is singular. Do the very best I'm able to do with the skills and abilities I have right now. There's not a whole lot of awareness about the different options. There's not a whole lot of choices. There's not usually a whole lot of reflection on what you're doing. There's certainly not like choosing to try something different and new, because again, as Meyah said, different and new is scary and risky. When your brain's in the performance zone, it's basically take everything I have at my disposal and do the very best I can right now. So you tend to not get a whole lot better when you're in the performance zone. You just kind of like solidify whatever your current best is. The improvement zone, which is generally what you can create if you're doing a good job structuring your practice and your role plays. The improvement zone is the brain has the space to pause and think, to reflect, to consider its options, to be more aware, to maybe choose a new path and handle things differently than what they're used to. And that's typically where the growth and improvement happens. So obviously, practice isn't the end goal. It's the behavior change that's the end goal. And doing it on the real sales calls is the end goal. Not to mention you always will definitely, learn some things from doing it in the real world that you can't learn in practice. But just generally speaking, the growth, the change, the learning tends to happen more in practice. When it's pressure's on, we got money on the line here, there tends to not be quite as much learning, at least not, as quick of a rate. So they both have their place, but I think more learning happens in the practice for sure.
I remember when we spoke about role plays and doing breakout rooms and pairing the AEs together, I did have this hesitation.
I know you did.
Right? And I think it would be very helpful for all of our listeners to hear what the hesitation was. And then you told me something that I'm like, oh, that is so true. So my biggest hesitation was I like role plays, but doing breakout rooms and then suddenly you have pairs of AEs together. Maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe it's a half an hour breakout session. My biggest fear, and maybe this is a me problem, but please tell me if it's not.
It's not a you problem. No.
What if they just go off for the 20 minutes, 30 minutes and talk about their weekend, talk about the show that they're watching on Netflix, gossip about what's happening and actually not use that time effectively? And I think from my perspective, whenever I think of breakout rooms, that is the fear that I have. They're just not going to use the time. They're just not going to use the time. It's, 20 minutes, that's gone, and they're not going to use it. And then you told me something, and you kind of prefaced the breakout rooms with this that I thought was quite powerful. Do you want to share with our listeners what it was?
Yeah, first of all, we call that out. We bake it into every session. What we've never worked with a team before, we say, look, people, we know It is very tempting that, you get sent away for 20 minutes. No one's watching. You can talk about your weekend. You can talk about right. So we literally name it. But then we remind them that the opportunity to practice safely and get in our at-bats and learn something new in the spirit of growing our skill and becoming better is so rare that though we cannot force them to do anything, right? They're all grown adults, that if that is something they care about and want to make happen, there's no better way to use the time than, in focused, deliberate practice. And I have never actually, I don't think, maybe once or twice, Jonathan, in our team engagements or community engagements, popped into a breakout room where people were not doing the thing.
That's great.
Because we named it and aligned it with something that they care about, right? Growth and development. Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
I think too that, if you were to pop in breakout rooms and see that happening, that might be a good almost indicator for you of how well you set up the practice in the beginning of the session, right? Because in order for people to spend the time practicing, you have to have created a safe space for them where they feel safe and comfortable trying on something new, making mistakes, feeling awkward and embarrassed, right? You have to have really gotten them excited for whatever skill you're teaching, right? They have to actually believe that being able to do this thing is going to make them a better seller. If you haven't quite connected the dots for them between this behavior I'm telling you should be doing and why should I be doing that and why should I care? Why would they invest the time to practice becoming good at that thing? Because they aren't even bought in that that thing is something they want to do anyways, right? You have to have been clear with what to do when they're in the breakout room, right? Don't just say, all right, guys, go practice. And people are like, oh, wait, what? What's that mean, right? You got to be very clear with the instructions on when you land in your breakout room, here's what you're supposed to be doing. So I think there's a lot of things that you need to do at the top of the session when you're teeing up the practice to really equip people with everything they need to kind of remove all the barriers, right? Whether those emotional barriers of fear or whether they're just logistical barriers of not being sure what to do. And you also have to kind of, light a fire under people and inspire them to want to do this thing by, again, getting their buy-in that, oh yeah, if I actually did that on my sales calls, I'd be much better off. Because you got to figure when someone's, comp plan is so heavily tied to performance, if you can get them to really believe that doing this thing is going to make them better, most people will invest the effort to do that thing. I think the problem is, a lot of times with trainings, people just kind of roll in and just start laying it out. All right, here, folks, here's what you got to do. And it isn't quite clear, why are we doing this? What's wrong with the old way of doing it, right? So I think that's the other thing. If you did see a lot of people not practicing, that might be your cue to look at the top of the session and figure out, all right, what's missing here?
The other thing too that we say, Malvina, maybe you were thinking of this when you asked the question, is around, we call out the difference between practice and performance before folks go into the first breakout, because all too often role plays are structured in a kind of high pressure way where the expectation is two people will come together, often in front of the team or an enablement person or a manager who's going to be giving them a lot of feedback. And their job is to just show everyone how skillful they are, how good they are, how much they already get it, right? And that is a really uncomfortable way to learn and grow. It's almost an impossible way to learn and grow. So what we call out is that this is not performance. This is an invitation to not be smooth, to stumble, to double back, to make corrections, to ask your practice partner for help, right? And the reason that we call that out is not only to give people permission to do that, but neuroscience has shown that type of practice, the slow, muddly, stumbly practice where you're really pushing yourself and building skill and awareness has a direct impact on how quickly the brain turns what it's learning into actual skill. We can go into a whole brain matter science thing. I'm not going to bore everyone there. So we really encourage that both for the sake of skill building and for everybody's nerves, which are usually so frigging high when they're told they're going to have to do a role play. You want to get that out of the way entirely.
Yeah. What's your advice to the enablement community when you're dealing with sellers that maybe have been in the industry for a very long period of time? And typically those are the sellers who are not very open to change, are not very open to trying new things out. It's great when you're working with a young sales team, a sales team that maybe is just at the beginning of their journey, because they're still very much that sponge, right? They want to soak up the knowledge. They want to learn. They're looking for ways to improve. They're open to that feedback. But when you're working with someone who's maybe been in the industry for a very long period of time, maybe has experienced some success, has been successful, it is very difficult to get them to change their habits. And that is the biggest struggle. How do you get someone to even be open to change, being open to trying something different without immediately defaulting back to what they know?
Mm.
A couple of things come to mind. I think with the people who've been in the industry longer, it's even more important that rather than just sit them down and teach them what they're supposed to be doing, helping guide them to it, right? This is something you really should be doing for anyone, because that's just how humans work. But it's even more important when they've been in the industry longer, right? Don't sit them down and say, okay, here's how I want you to sell. Here's how I want you to handle the situation. Here's the questions you should be asking. Go practice it. Rather, ask them questions. Hey, what are some of the challenges you run into? Why do you think you're running into those challenges? And kind of guide them down a thought path that leads them to the conclusion that you had, which is this is the way you should handle these situations. But don't just lay it out to them. Guide them there. Take them through the same mental journey you went through when you were puzzling out how to handle the situation. And then by the time they get there, they feel like they own the solution that, yes, this is in fact the way I want to handle that situation. This is what I want to, be doing as a seller. So I think
Sounds
that's
a
one
lot like
part of it.
selling.
Truthfully, yeah.
That's what we're doing. Yeah.
So guide them there, right? Guide them to the conclusion rather than just telling them this is how you should handle it is a big one. And then I think you will need to give them more repetitions, more practice, right? With a new seller, they've got 2 months worth of habits to overcome. With someone who's been in the business 20 years, they do have 20 years of habits to overcome. So expect it to take a little longer, expect it to need more repetitions. But again, truthfully, that's the same process with anyone. It's just more of it for the people who've been in sales a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And I'll also say too, like there are some folks who are just not particularly growth minded, who are forever going to be arm crossers. And all of the things that we're suggesting are ways to kind of increase the likelihood that they'll relax their arms, right? But everyone has been on a sales team with someone who doesn't prepare to grow or feels they know it all. And that's up really to the leaders, if that's the kind of individual that they want to have on their team. Because one thing that studies of team cultures have shown is that like one bad apple really can spoil the bunch. And when what we're trying to create here is an environment where folks feel safe enough to learn, that can be kind of dangerous for the learning environment.
I want to touch upon one final element, which practice is wonderful, but there also has to be reinforcement. Who does that reinforcement sit with, in your opinions?
Yeah. What the great answer, I think, is that it can sit with the whole team in a variety of configurations. One of the things that we've started to do when we work with teams is we give sales leaders and enablement folks kind of what we call blueprints for a booster session. So a week later or 2 weeks later, they can, do some refreshers with the team. But beyond that, the beautiful thing about practice is that it can really take the burden off of the lone sales leader or the lone enabler to be responsible for skill development. And Jonathan, maybe you want to speak to this. There's the ability to really disperse it across the team. Do you want to talk about like building cultures of practice?
Yeah. What is the really powerful thing is once you have, kind of tapped into this practice thing, is the practice can happen in leader's absence. Again, especially if you're good about giving your team kind of clear guidelines on what to practice and what that practice looks like. And then you've suddenly got a scenario where reps can practice with each other, right? Whether it's kind of an impromptu thing where 2 reps say, hey, I'm struggling with X. Do you want to meet up and practice? Or whether it's a more structured thing, right? Where you actually pair team members together to like meet up once every 2 weeks to practice. But you can, if you give people the proper guidance and structure, you can actually get to this position where reps are able to grow and develop and improve themselves, even in the absence of the leader being there. So suddenly you've decoupled reps' ability to grow from leadership availability, right? And time. And the big struggle when I was a seller, right? I never, ever, ever had a leader who was able to give me as much time as I had an appetite for to help me grow and improve. And it's just, the nature of the industry. But if you can get to a place where, again, you've given your reps clear guidance on, hey, here's what good looks like, here's how you can practice, and you practice with them as a group, then you can send them off on their own to do some of the reinforcement one-on-one together. And, there are technology tools that make this easy. There's a tool that we use called Meetsy, which kind of takes all the logistical headaches out of it, of getting reps paired together and finding a time that works for everyone. So at that point, it becomes a really light lift for reps to do this. But yeah, if you can find a way to get your reps practicing one-on-one without you having to be in the room, then you've unlocked huge potential for growth without you being the bottleneck as the leader, and it's all based on your availability.
Yeah.
And I'll add it's growth in terms of skill growth, but there is something so deeply powerful about for the team culture, about building a culture of practice on a team. And there's actually this really interesting academic paper called, I think it's called Psychological Safety on Work Teams. But one of the things that this research who studied teams across a variety of industries found is that when there were certain behaviors on a team present, happening regularly, some of them being risk-taking, experimentation, making mistakes, asking for help and feedback, sharing information that could be helpful with the group, that indicates a really high level of psychological safety on a team, which of course is like the gold standard of what makes for the best and highest performing cultures. And what's so beautiful about all of those learning behaviors is that those behaviors are what happen in a practice space. So in addition to psychological safety already being there, being good for starting practice, in my experience, teams that practice together and create a space where people can be vulnerable and mess up and try things on for size, that can actually do wonders for creating a culture of psychological safety. So it's like it's in some ways a prerequisite for great practice, but not necessarily, because everybody wants in their lives permission to show up in their life and in their work as who they are, right? And all of us are imperfect and beautifully human. And everybody breathes a collective sigh of relief when that space is created in their working life. So separate from skill and ROI and close rates and all of that stuff, a culture of practice is a beautiful place to be and a beautiful thing to be a part of.
I love that. I love that. And I have to say, I've obviously utilized the booster session that you guys put together.
Yeah, tell us.
For reinforcement. And one of the things that enablement folks are always thinking is, oh, how big of a lift is it going to be just to continue running these reinforcement sessions? And I have to say, with the materials that you provided, that session it just went so smoothly. It was so easy to pick up. I watched the video from you. I knew exactly what I had to do. It was, I don't want to say effortless, but it was pretty much effortless. And the value, I think, was huge, right? We've had A's come off and actually say, "Oh, I'm glad we've done that because I've forgotten that last element," or "I actually forgot what this particular section meant." And it shows you that repetition and reinforcement is so necessary, because it could be a simple concept. But again, if you don't practice, if you don't talk about it, if the conversations aren't happening, you are going to forget. And I think that for me was also a reminder of whatever it is, whatever training we're running, whatever program we've implemented, even if it sounds, this is easy, this is a small change, this isn't big, you can learn it in one day. Actually, the truth is, that reinforcement is really necessary.
Yeah.
So thank you.
We're so glad. Well, this is the thing, we've been developing this approach for 2 years. And then the next code to crack is really, well, how do we empower and enable people with the materials to be able to do this themselves? Because we're two people, the sales industry is large, practice is so effective. We want as many people practicing as possible. So to hear that from you, Malvina, is just like, well totally lights us up. Yeah, really, really. And well done for running the session.
Yeah, you guys are incredible. And I think it also helps when you bring the energy and the enthusiasm, and you're both extremely likable as well, right? Which means that sellers are going to open up to you. They're like, oh, they're talking, they're nice. They're not here to like point out my flaws. They actually want me to get better. It does feel like a safe space, because it's one thing to say this is a safe space and everyone's like, yes. It's not. Right. And it's another one when you actually feel like it is a safe space for learning. And that is exactly what everyone gets with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you. We're so glad. When you're tinkering away at something for all this time and finally bring it out into the world, it's great to hear all the feedback, because ways we can improve, but also to hear that the way that we intend for it to support people is happening. That feels great to hear. So thank you, Malvina.
Yeah.
Meyah and Jonathan have something really exciting for our listeners. So Meyah, do you want to tell us what it is?
I'm passing the torch to Jonathan. He's a better CTA giver than I am.
All right, let's go.
Oh, I'm not so sure about that, but I'll do my best here. So, the process we've described in this episode of, picking an individual moment, getting clear on what good looks like, figuring out how to give crystal clear instructions of how to practice, that can be a little bit challenging to do. So one of the things that we've done is we've already gone through this process for objection handling, because that's a really difficult moment for a lot of folks to know how to handle. And we've actually created an exercise that helps reps to take that moment of objection handling when they hear those words, hey, we're going to have to push this off for 6 months, or hey, our CFO shot this down, and take that moment from a moment of panic and maybe a moment of confrontation and a conversation ender, and really turn that moment into a much more relaxed moment first, but also a moment where they really are able to open up a brand new conversation, right? Where they're able to start getting the buyer to lower their defenses, open up a little more about what's going on, and really have a thorough dialogue about the situation to see if there's a way to work through it or not. And this exercise is one that we've run at a lot of teams. It's quite popular. And Meyah and I were looking at our training calendar in August, and we realized that we have a little bit of room that we could do a couple of these sessions with some listeners of this show. So if you listen to this show and you think this approach to practice sounds great, and if you want your reps to be handling objections a little bit differently and better, then reach out to us. And we will be selecting 3 teams from the listener base of this show to run a free session with in August around objection handling. So you can simply email us hello@thepracticelab.co, not .com. That'll go somewhere else entirely. It's for thepracticelab.co. Subject line, the enablement brew. And, we can see if you can be one of the 3 teams that we take the session to in August.
So excited because I've
How'd I
done
do
this
that,
session,
Meyah?
and it is awesome.
Well done, Jonathan.
That was awesome.
All
That
right.
was awesome, and the session is incredible. So month of August, I think that's the perfect time. It's summer, right? September, right around the corner. I can't believe September is nearly around the corner when we put
Ridiculous.
it that way. And it's maybe for a lot of companies out there, it's also a calmer time, right? Maybe it is that perfect time to invest a little bit more in learning and growth and discovery in better ways of practicing and handling objections. So thank you both. Now,
Thank you.
the enablement brew, and because I don't have my co-host with me, I completely messed this up. Please tell me what you're drinking.
So I have drunk already water with various flower essences in it. One for courage and one for adapting to change.
What
Walnut.
are the flower essences? You have to tell me what the flower essence is.
It's walnut essence, and the other one is gorse flower. Gorse flower.
Yeah. Does it taste nice?
It doesn't taste like anything. But yeah.
Very nice.
They've been great for me. Yeah. What are you drinking, John?
Well, my answer's gonna sound quite boring in comparison. A stainless steel bottle of tap water. Usually, most mornings I'll have like some green tea and a honey in it, but this morning I was a little behind schedule, so I just filled up the bottle and called it a day.
All right, so I have tea. Have you ever had biscuit tea?
No.
Okay, so there's this tea in the UK. It's called biscuit tea. And it's just black tea, but it's meant to taste like when you dunk a biscuit or a cookie in your tea. Delicious. With a little bit.
Does it taste like that?
Yes, it tastes amazing. Every single family member that I've introduced biscuit tea to, they're like, this is the best stuff on earth. So yeah, biscuit tea. Google it.
Can I Google biscuit tea? Okay, I'm going to get some biscuit tea. Good.
Yorkshire Gold biscuit tea. There you
Woo!
go.
All right. You heard it here, listeners.
That's awesome.
All right, guys. Well, thank you to everyone tuning in. We're looking forward to hearing from all of you. And I think that's a wrap for this episode of the Enablement Brew. So Meyah, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much,
Hey,
Marina.
thanks for having us.